Welcome to the Education Corner, a podcast by Education Choices magazine.
Education Corner podcast would like to welcome Naima Charlier, Director of EDI and Social Responsibility at Wellington College. Wellington College opened in 1859 as a boys' boarding school for the education of orphans of the British Armed Forces, but now has expanded to become one of the nation's co-educational boarding schools. Under the direction of the 13th Master, Dr. Anthony Selden, between 2006 and 2015, the college acquired an admirable reputation for its approach to education, underpinning an academic foundation with innovative ways of developing the emotional, physical, and spiritual sides of its pupils. This has continued ever since, now under the leadership of the 15th Master, James Dahl. Good morning. It's lovely to meet you. Would you like to tell me a little bit more about your background prior to becoming the Director of EDI and Social Responsibility?
Absolutely. Good morning. Really nice to talk to you. So my background is that of a lifelong teacher. I've been a teacher for about 25 years now. The first thing that I did on leaving school as part of work experience, I just loved working with young people. So I started as a teacher in London and in the city school. I did a couple of years there, and then in 2000 I moved to the US and I taught in Atlanta in South Fulton County. So it was really interesting 3 years working in a predominantly African-American school in that environment with some children from very challenging backgrounds, which I loved supporting the young people and seeing how they would grow and flourish. But I found it quite exhausting. And after those 3 years and my 2 years in London, I was kind of ready to stop education and took a little break and travelled. And found myself starting what was to be 10 years in Romania, where we grew a school, and I had many roles in that school, including the founding head of primary, and then went on to be deputy principal. It was a 3 to 18 school. And from there, I moved to Hong Kong, which is how I ended up in Wellington. I was 8 years in Hong Kong, and my roles there included founding head of school again. We had 4 schools, and I was director of teaching and learning. So my role was very much developing and building curriculum, working with teachers on pedagogy, and supporting the development of a brand new school and lots of lovely young people. And in the same time, I was part of a task force that was looking at EDI globally. I was working with an organisation that had over 80 schools around the world, and we were very interested in how to support EDI in all our schools and what that might look like. So that was an additional role to my Director of Teaching and Learning role. And that's where I was before coming to Wellington.
Very, very dynamic and exciting. Tell us more now about your role at Wellington.
So my role at Wellington, somebody gave it to me. They handed it to me at a time when I was looking at another school leadership position, and this role appeared, and I'd never seen a role like it. Director of EDI and Social Responsibility isn't something that I'd encountered before, and it represented such an exciting opportunity to work with this world-leading school that was so passionate about the need to acknowledge and support and work with children who are growing up in this very interconnected global world. So the idea of the barriers that can sometimes exist for young people if they don't feel like they're included, if they don't feel like they belong for whatever reason, and actively learning about what kinds of barriers exist and what schools should be doing and could be doing to break down those barriers and to ensure that the well-being of children, their ability to be valued, being their unique selves, was something that a school had put at such a high priority level that it just immediately attracted me. So the opportunity to come and work to develop a really global approach to EDI. And I think it's a good time to say EDI is equality, diversity, inclusion. 3 very separate ideas, very separate things that need individual attention. Because and my background sort of comes into this as well. I grew up, my father was from India, my mother from Scotland. I grew up with, her parents were blind, so my sort of mixed race, interracial marriage of my parents was an interesting topic of conversation with her blind parents, and he was Muslim. So just lots of interesting things around the potential barriers that exist when you have a difference that maybe other people don't share. And when I was in a small town in Oxfordshire growing up and seeing sort of less people that looked like me and experiencing a curriculum that didn't really seem to reflect everything that made me and my family and my history, it just piqued my interest at a very, very young age. So the idea that we can look at these different issues of inclusion and of diversity and of equality as being separate elements that we need to achieve in order to have everybody firing on all cylinders. There's a great thing around you can have a diverse group of people, but if they all don't feel really valued, then you're not going to benefit from that diversity of perspective or diversity of thought or experience. And I saw that again and again in all these different places that I've lived and worked, that you might have a melting pot of people, you might have a great mixture, but if there seems to be a dominant idea of what good looks like and it's not super inclusive, then it can actually be quite harmful and you can lose all the power and the wonderfulness that is the diversity of human beings that we have. So I think that's a really good example of why I think it's so important.
Wellington College were one of the first schools to teach wellbeing as part of the formal curriculum. Can you tell us a little bit more about this and the Harkness pedagogy?
When I saw this job and I started doing my research into Wellington College and the kind of establishment that they were and the work that they were doing, which is so innovative and so forward, I think, in the way that they understand how learning happens and how children need to interact, that they placed wellbeing at the centre of a curriculum. So you see it in the way that the children here, they have lessons in wellbeing, a carefully constructed programme that colleagues here have developed to support them in all the multiple ways that they need to be in the world these days. The world these days is very different to when we were at school, so the curriculum needs to change in order to support that. And the world that the children are going into is very different. So having this dedicated team of people focused on wellbeing, having lessons taught in the curriculum that sequentially give students an opportunity to learn and understand concepts that are going to support those things is really valuable. And this idea of Harkness learning, which is about not thinking that the teacher is the one at the front with all the knowledge, who's going to then just put it in the heads of the young people. It's about coming together as a group and students having agency and having their own voices heard and co-creating learning and knowledge and sharing their ideas with a teacher that will support the conversation and will guide, but that the children themselves get to have their voices valued and put their own perspective into it. And that aligns so beautifully with the EDI world, which again is about that acceptance and understanding that everybody matters, that there's a voice for every person and a perspective that's going to be valuable. And when we think of, who's the expert in the room is the expert. So that concept that sits beneath Harkness learning really aligned very well with my own beliefs about pedagogy and learning and how education needs to be to help cater to the dynamic world that children are going off into.
Then there's the Wellington College values, and I'm bringing all of this up because obviously your social responsibility as well as the EDI, and I think they all are very interlinked. And the values are kindness, responsibility, respect, integrity, and courage. And they are modelled and practiced in everyday life in the school. Can you tell me a little bit more about how that is achieved at Wellington?
I think school values, and all schools have values when you visit them. One of my other roles is I'm a lead improvement partner, which means I go into other schools and I support them with the work they're trying to do there. And so schools have values. When it's really embedded, when you feel it, it sort of sings to you that the school values are part of everything they do. And one of the things that struck me when I visited Wellington was just how embedded the values were in the way the students were speaking to each other, working with each other, the way that colleagues and teachers interacted with the students, the processes and the procedures that we had in place that acknowledged and lift up the kind of character education that the children are having here and the value that's placed on examples of kindness, of integrity, of courage, and how the adults who are working here constantly reference these and model these We have amazing values champions that talk to these values and give really good examples of when these are at work and when they're being upheld. And they use those in the college recognitions and the college systems that reward behaviour and help educate the young people about the best way to make a mistake, because this is a college, it's full of young people who of course are going to make mistakes. But how do you make a mistake and then acknowledge that, learn from it, say sorry if that's what's needed to be done, own that mistake, and then authentically sort of move on with that personal journey that you're on. And I think at Wellington, it's been just so obvious that people believe in each one of those values. The students believe in each one of those. And they don't just believe, they appreciate that they're there and they want to embody them in everything they do. And I've seen that again and again through assemblies, through talks, through student work, through a chapel address we had this morning, which just sang to me because it was such a beautiful moment talking about the human connectedness that we all have and how we as individuals can sort of uplift each other, but also take care of each other. And it was just yet another moment. I have so many moments in the days here where the values are just everywhere.
It's true. I've visited the school. You feel it from the moment you set foot on the door. Obviously, your job is a big responsibility and it's, very innovative at the moment for the school to have a director of EDI and Social Responsibility. What challenges do you feel you've faced with implementing it within the school setting?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think because Wellington actually started on this journey of EDI a few years ago, they consulted with an external company and they asked them to come in and audit the school for EDI. And out of that audit, one of the big ideas was to employ somebody in this role. So I think in terms of challenges, it's been about co-creating in our own understanding of what these terms mean, what ambitions we have for change, where change is needed, but also how we can organise ourselves to make it clear what our priorities are. So in the EDI world, we have different dimensions that we look at. We have the Equalities Act, which helps us to understand and acknowledge groups that might need more support than others. So we have people with various protected characteristics. But we also have our own unique context here at Wellington with the young people that we have in front of us and all of their needs and their desires and their decision making, their voice in what it is we need to focus on. So we have different dimensions that we look at. For an example, gender is one of them. You mentioned that we've gone from being a boys' school to a co-educational school. So that's a journey that the college has already been on. So what does that look like when we look at all the different facets that impact on boys and girls here? What potential barriers might there be? Where is it really strong? Where is it maybe less strong? How do we know? How are we auditing that and hearing the voices and looking at everything from policies and procedures to the outcomes? And how are we celebrating everything that needs to be celebrated so no group feels that they are not part of it? So there's an educational piece around just understanding what it is we're trying to do, as well as all the different activities that we want to do in order to make a difference in each of these really important areas. And I mentioned gender in particular because I've been very open in my own personal journey. When I did my MBA, which was in international educational leadership, you have to do a research piece for that. And the piece that I did was on women in leadership. And in my profession, which is a heavily female profession, at the very senior levels, there is an imbalance between men and women. It's a personal area of interest for me that I have been researching and speaking about for a long time. There are many other lenses that we look at when we look at diversity. So we look at race and ethnicity. We have series of work we're doing under the heading of pride for all of our community members that are part of a community, and all of the work that we're doing on neurodiversity and how our brains can work in different ways and how wonderful that can be and how beneficial it can be to have people who think differently. We've been looking at disability and how we can ensure that our campus, our lessons, the way that we operate is as inclusive as possible and removing any potential barriers that we might have. We've looked at all the faiths that we have in our college community and how we can celebrate everything. So I can give you lots and lots and lots of examples of different activities and things that we've done. But the bigger piece for me was on how do we understand ourselves here as a community at Wellington, what it is we're talking about when we talk about EDI, what it is we're talking about when we talk about social responsibility, which for us is about equity, inclusion, and environmental sustainability. So another 3 massive areas that we have series of projects underway to improve in all of those spaces. So the understanding and the building that understanding and building relationships has been the key thing. I've been here 1 year, just over 1 year. So a lot of that first year was about just getting to know people and getting to know what they cared about, what they thought we should be looking at. And we created teams that work on lots of different areas. So we have an EDI steering group that comprises of governors and people across the college and our heads of college who are our student leaders. We have EDI champions. We have EDI committees. We have inclusion ambassadors in each house. I just finished 3 sessions of training with them, with external speakers that come in to talk about particular topics. And we have a variety of other things that we're doing. So as you can see, there's a lot to be done, but there's a lot of exciting things to get involved with. It struck me from a really young age, I talk about this word, tolerate. Often in school policies, when you talk about difference, we talk about tolerating others. And I've always kind of pushed back about the idea of tolerance, not because we should be tolerant of each other, of course we would, but it doesn't go far enough. It's that idea not just of tolerating, but just actively appreciating and valuing difference when we come across it and wanting to get to know more and be really curious about why somebody thinks the way they think or is the way they are, or what we can learn from each other in a way that sort of unites us as human beings.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So more of a celebration of each other. And I imagine all this work is obviously directly one of the things I've discussed with many of the people we've interviewed is kind of how this is affecting the curriculum. But I imagine all of the initiatives and everything else, it must be making it that everyone think about what they're teaching, how they're teaching it. The curriculum content is going to be impacted massively also.
Yeah, I think because the more you discuss things and the more open your conversations are about issues that are really important things. There's tragic murder of George Floyd. We had the movement from Everyone's Invited. We've had other events on a global scale that have brought elements to the forefront of people's mind around justice and fairness and equality and equity. The questions in the minds of our young people are very much at the forefront. So when teachers are working on their curriculum content or working on the lessons that they're taking with these young people, there's always this element of another lens to be looking through when they're covering their content or when they're having discussions. And I think that's really valuable and really helpful. I think intellectual curiosity is a really powerful thing when it's combined with empathy and compassion. And if you want to know more about why and understand why is this the way it is, and you want to think critically about the information that's presented to you on social media or in the news, and really dig into your own self to think, well, who's presenting this information? Why is it presented in this way? What other agenda might be at play here? And be really an active critical thinker rather than just a consumer. It's really important. And one of the things that struck me when I came back to England after 23 years overseas was just how binary the argument had become. We seemed to be in this space where you were a yes or you were a no. You were right or you were wrong. You had one option and all the rest didn't seem to be an acceptable option. And that just horrified me. The idea that we can take such complicated ideas of humans that come from very, very different spaces and backgrounds, have different stories, have different outlets, have different perspectives, and boil it down to one single statement or position is so wrong that we need to educate children and young people that this is what's happening and why might it be happening. And you need to think for yourself, especially with the rise of social media and the algorithms and AI that can put children into an echo chamber where they can go further and further into just one viewpoint. We need to give them the ability to pull up and really have an umbrella overview of the whole landscape and be curious and ask questions and wonder, but come from that place of empathy and compassion and look at how are we similar rather than looking for, well, how are we different? I think that's a really good place to start. How are we all similar? What are the things that are worrying us as human beings? Why do we feel that way or say that thing or position ourselves in that way? And then if we are seeing barriers for people, potentially people are not feeling included and not feeling like they belong, then we need to dismantle those barriers. We need to actively do something about that. And I think our young people are really passionate about being change makers, about having, we talk a lot about service leadership here, about being those people that stand up and say, going back to the values now, having courage to say if something is not right, because they have an understanding of fairness, of equality. They can understand where sometimes equity is needed. You can't just give everybody the same thing and expect them all to have the same outcome because everybody's not starting from the same point. So having children understand that and explore that in a really safe way so that they can challenge each other and they can have really good conversations where they come to an understanding of what they think and what they believe. Having that space that's safe to do that links beautifully to the wellbeing work that's done here, to the Harkness tables that you referenced, to the values that live and breathe at Wellington. And it links all the way back to your beginning questions about why I came. I wanted to work somewhere where this was so important that they would create this role. I just thought, what a privilege, what an absolute delight and honour to be able to work somewhere with people like the people I work with here, and the young people and the parents. What an amazing community to be part of, to really look at how we can change things and make the world fairer and better for everyone. That's what makes me excited and gets me out of bed in the morning.
You've talked at length about the work that's taking place and the involvement on the part of the children, but you've been there for a year now. Can you already see an impact on the children and the school community from having someone specifically in this role? I mean, it's slightly unfair to ask you.
I say absolutely yes. We have a head of social impact as well as director of social responsibility. We have a head of social impact who's amazing. So looking at impact, how do we know if what we're doing is doing what we want it to? It's a key question in our schools. We are looking at data. We're trying to measure as much as we can. Belonging is a really hard thing to measure, but you can measure equity data. So data is a really good place for us to start looking. But you also do get the anecdotal data, the quantitative and qualitative data that comes from student voice and our interactions with community members, and from some of those groups that I talked to you about, where we're actively asking questions around the work that we're doing. So anecdotally, I've had conversations recently actually with several different students, different parts of the college and with different backgrounds, who have talked about feeling that there is a shift, is a change in, there does seem to be some really wonderful things that are happening in the inclusion space and in that developing sense of celebration of difference and the celebration of having a really inclusive culture. So we were working on a little film just to launch out Black History Month. We've got an amazing art exhibition that's going up in the college for Black History Month. There's assembly, there's some musical work that's happening, as well as some talks and some exhibitions. So it's a big celebration. And one of the young students that had volunteered to do the film was a Black student, and he had new to Wellington, had come from a school in inner city London. And I was saying, oh, so your school in London, there's a big Black community there, and what was it like Black History Month? And he said, oh, well, they kind of used the same PowerPoint for 5 years. So it was a little bit ridiculous. I was like, oh, okay, that's a shame. So does it feel that the celebrations here are going to be some good celebrations? What do you think? And yeah, some really positive comments about elements of work that we're doing that are raising awareness and raising celebration for all of our community. So that makes me feel encouraged. And the inclusion ambassadors that I worked with, we've done it for 2 years now. We had a cohort beginning last year and we just had another set. And these young people are volunteers, 17 different boarding houses at Wellington. So there's 2 in each house. They're lower 6 students, so they're natural stepping into that older section of the school, and they lead on how to make sure that everyone in their house feels that they belong here. And the feedback from them, again, it was really positive about how much they feel the school value this work. And I think just the volunteers that we have stepping forward to help with this work is another indication of impact that we're seeing. So many students giving up their time, and this is 2 hours at the end of a long full day of work they'd already had, and they're there because they want to be there and they want to take part in this work and they think it's really important. So anecdotal data is coming in, there's a feeling, but you're right, this kind of work, this is about embedding long-term change. It's not something that you want to do as a tick box exercise, or that the director of EDI is going to do that. It's everybody here, the whole community, and the master, the governors, the leadership team here. They are so positive and such strong champions of this work and how important it is. And that feels really powerful and really hopeful.
I think it's incredible. One of our first podcasts was with the 15th Master, James Dahl. He was very keen at the time. They were just beginning the education grant provision, and the Prince Albert Scholarship Programme were all big things that were taking place at the time. Both of these support children from a diverse range of socio-economic backgrounds and give them the ability to attend Wellington with full benefits of the education there. And one parent, Prince Albert Foundation Ambassador Ian Drayden, commented, "The Prince Albert Scholarship Programme resonates with me because it's my firm belief that the best and the brightest children should have access to every opportunity, regardless of their background." Now, I'm sure all of this is part of the community and a big part of the ethos behind Wellington, but as director of EDI, how do you ensure that these children, like you've mentioned one already, I believe, who are perhaps coming from slightly different backgrounds or communities, become fully integrated in the Wellington College community?
The Prince Albert Scholarship Programme is incredible in its depth and its reach in the support it gives for these students, not just as they go through Wellington, but up until the age of 25. And the head of the Prince Albert Foundation, Sarah Miller, who works just across the office from me and has been supporting these young people on their journeys, both at Wellington and beyond, would certainly articulate how important that wraparound care is. The care that happens after they leave Wellington, that sets them firmly on their way into university and into the world of work, and then allows them to really make the most out of the opportunity. The social economic background of the students who qualify for this scholarship programme is obviously going to create a difference within a Wellington community. We're a boarding school with bees. So that socioeconomic difference that they have in terms of their backgrounds before they come here could potentially be something that makes it difficult for them when they are here. But the work that Sarah Miller does and her team in ensuring that when they are arriving at the college, prior to arrival, there's lots of work that goes on to make sure they feel part of the community. There's lots of work once they're in college to ensure that their pastoral care, and there's a huge pastoral team here, but she ensures that that pastoral care is really appropriate and taking into account that they will come from a different background to the rest of our students. They might have additional support that they could access via her, and the check-ins and the facilities that she ensures they have access to as and when they need makes for a really strong wraparound support programme that allows them to then just make the most of their time here and focus on everything they're here for, which is the same experience as every other Wellington student. So they have the same social opportunities, the same trips, the same opportunities to learn an instrument if they wish, or to take part in any of the activities, and her team kind of take away any potential barriers that they might face in accessing any of that, or any of that knowledge that they might miss from maybe not going to a similar prep school to some of our students who are coming in. So I think that team is the really important part of making this successful. I have some PATH alumni who work with me on the EDI steering group. So their feedback on the experiences they've had at Wellington in the years that they were here, and their feedback on the work we're doing is really crucial, that allows us to bridge the difference between, somebody like myself whose experience is very limited, being new to the UK, new to the school, and theirs who actually went through it. And one of those alumni was training my inclusion ambassadors last week, so she spoke to them all directly about the scholarship programme and about potential barriers that people can face and what everybody can do to make sure that they don't exist, and that we're really careful to be as inclusive as possible from everybody.
It's a fantastic thing. Wellington College is incredibly innovative and pioneering as a school and community. Are there any further exciting initiatives that are planned with regards to furthering EDI and social responsibility within the student body?
There's always so many exciting new things, but there's always so many exciting new students. And when you have student voice and you have student agency, which we do, the potential to get involved with new and wonderful things is always on the cards. Similar to this one, we did a podcast with the students last year, and the podcasts were designed with the students and conducted with the students and panels of adults as well, to create these little mini podcasts that parents and students could listen to together. So maybe in the car, driving home, somewhere where it's a relaxed environment, just to talk to their parents. We positioned these as an aid to having conversations. I did one on wokeness with some colleagues and some students. That was a really good scheme. The students are looking at different ways to hold talks and to form different groups and to raise awareness of different issues, which is wonderful. And then us as a community, we have our international schools, we have natural partners with very different perspectives to our own. We have our prep schools and feeder schools. We are already doing work to network and share information and share best practice and share ideas for ways that we can support other community members who maybe are newer on their journey of EDI and social responsibility and need sort of ideas and support, but also ways that we can learn from each other, because everyone's in a very different context as well as a very different place in their journey. So networking is really, really crucial, and freely talking about the journey that we're on, really, really transparent. This is where we are and this is what we're trying to do is something that's important to us, that we're not just being closed doors about what we're up to, that we're sharing and we're actively saying, look, we're trying really hard to do the right thing, but if you can see anything which you think you should be doing that's better or different, then please talk to us. We don't want to have that binary place of there's a right thing and a wrong thing. We want to be in a space where, as human beings, we're connecting and we're learning from each other. So I think positioning ourselves like that is really important to me. I think it's a really good thing when you work with young people to be really open about what works well and what we can learn from each other.
That we're all learning.
All the time.
Thank you so much for giving up your time to speak to us. And I think I'm busy arranging a time to come in and visit, and I look forward to meeting you in person.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really nice talking to you this morning, Chloe.